Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to be painting a beautiful misty morning sunrise scene with a sort of silhouette of a church and some trees in the background. I want it to be very soft and very misty, and for this I'm going to use a limited palette of two colours, and I'm going to be trying out my new Prussian blue and Venetian red, and these are two of our handmade watercolours that I'm testing, and hopefully both colours should be available in our Etsy shop, Morgana Rose Art, in the next few weeks if everything works out okay. I'm using Millford 100% cotton paper. It's taped to my board with ordinary decorators masking tape, and my board is at an angle of about 45 degrees. I'm painting the sky wet in wet, so I wet the whole page first with my large bamboo haki brush that I found online a few years ago. No link, I'm afraid. And this is the Venetian red. It's a very strong colour, so it's mixed with plenty of water. And this is the Prussian blue, which again is a very strong colour, and that's mixed with plenty of blue too. Now I'm using horizontal brush strokes and trying to get a nice blend of the two colours. As the water is... The paint and water is drifting down the page because the board's at an angle of about 45 degrees. And you can see I'm getting some nice soft diffusions. So I'm adding a little bit more colour in here and there, this time with a small Pro Art Ron Ranson Haki brush. I'm working it again horizontally across the page. Still looking for this lovely soft sort of sunrise glow across the top, and I want this sort of misty background. This is a mixture, a stronger mixture, a richer mixture of the two colours, Prussian blue and Venetian red, and it gives me this beautiful sort of purplish grey, and I'm bringing this across the bottom to strengthen up the dark shadows, because I want deeper shadows across the bottom of the painting, which should then contrast beautifully with the sort of misty midground. And I'm going to be painting in a church and a steeple just in silhouette. So I'm working to get those shapes right. And you can see how strong the Venetian red is. It's gone on there a little bit too strong, so I just have to soften that back and spread it across the page a little bit more. And because this mixture of paint is richer and drier than the wet wash across the sky area, it's staying there. It's diffusing softly, but it's staying there and giving me this nice sort of dark but sort of misty texture, which will start off my foreground impressions of trees. Just while it's still wet, a little bit more Prussian blue across the middle because I'd lost a lot of my blue. So I'm just drifting very pale Prussian blue into the light red, and that's giving me my beautiful sunrise effects. It will all dry back a lot paler, so now I need to leave it to dry completely. So I'm going to lay my board flat and then let it dry. You can, of course, use any brand of Prussian blue and Venetian red, and if you don't have Venetian red, then light red is a very good substitute. So here it is. The washes have dried back beautifully pale, and I've got that lovely subtle misty background, but with that beautiful sunset glow high up in the sky. So now I'm using my 3/4 inch flat brush, and I've mixed up another grey, sort of inky consistency grey, using the Prussian blue and Venetian red, and I'm just dropping it carefully into my outline of my church steeple and tower and the roof. And you can see I'm carefully filling it in, but the flat brush is the right shape to do this. And because my paint mixture is quite watery, I'm keeping a nice wet edge as I paint across the whole shape, and that gives me a really smooth finish, so the paint isn't drying out anywhere, so I can create this really nice clean wash that fills the church and the tower. And then changing to a round brush, a synthetic brush, it's a Polina Bright, I am creating in exactly the same colour the lower part of the church, which then runs on either side into the trees, softening back as I go. I can clean out my brush and dry it and then soften underneath any of those marks. So what I'm trying to do is create a sort of seamless look between the church and the misty trees. I don't want any hard edges there really, or very few. And the few hard edges that I end up getting, I can turn into slightly stronger impressions of just the silhouettes of the tree branches and maybe a few tree trunks showing through the mist. So now back to the 3/4 inch synthetic flat brush and a slightly stronger, but not much, slightly stronger mixture to start with across the bottom right corner of the page, putting in some slightly stronger and harder marks, again to build up the sort of the foreground impression of misty trees, still making sure I keep that lovely misty background showing through, particularly on the left side of the painting. And then changing brushes again to soften back. This is important, to just keep softening and blending and keeping an eye on the painting as you go along to make sure that you're getting that lovely soft effect. Now I'm back to the 3/4 inch flat and I'm outlining my church spire or steeple, just going over my pencil marks that I drew in at the beginning. And now I think a smaller brush, so I'm going to use my small calligraphy brush. You can use any small brush with a good point to do this, and just to fill in that spire very, very cleanly and smoothly. And then there's a couple of little sort of turrety bits on either side of the spire. I'm being quite careful here because obviously the church is the focal point here. So I'm trying to make sure I get the spire really even and straight. And again, a little architectural detail on the left side of the roof. And that's our church just about finished. So I think all I'm going to do now is just strengthen up the impression of the trees on either side of the church. On the right side, I'm pulling some strokes of the same grey through any gaps that I've got to indicate tree trunks and branches. And I'm going to put a few sort of little indications of tree canopies over the top of those areas on the right, and then maybe just a single tree on the left. But I'm not going to overdo it. I'm going to keep this very, very subtle, because I think there's already enough of an impression of the trees in the mist already, and the last thing I want to do is overwork this painting, as I think it's looking quite nice and fresh at the moment. So I think that's nearly done. Just a few dabs of paint, slightly darker, still, which will blend into the damp paint already and soften and diffuse. But where it's gone onto the dry wash, I've got some slightly harder edges, but still in that soft grey that's in keeping with this kind of misty scene. And now that I've finished, it's really important to step away and let it dry completely and not to fiddle with it at all. If you were going to paint something similar, you could, of course, add a lot more detail and a lot more trees, and I think that that would look fantastic, but I've decided to leave it there because I like the simplicity of this. So now that it's dry, I'm going to remove the tape and just have a look at it and make sure that I think it looks okay. When you see a painting with its clean white border, it's almost like seeing it framed. So you get the chance to look at it with fresh eyes and you can make an assessment as to whether or not you think it's done or whether you think it might need a few more details. And I'm quite happy with this. I think I've achieved what I set out to do, which was to create this misty scene, and I've tested out my handmade Prussian blue and Venetian red, and I'm very, very happy with the effects of these beautiful paints. So I will be making some of these for the shop in a few weeks. But as I said before, you can use any brand of Prussian blue and Venetian red, or maybe light red, to get this beautiful sunrise glow, and to mix these really attractive greys from Prussian blue and the Venetian or light red. Thanks so much for watching. I hope it was useful. Please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, as it really helps with my reach. And thank you so much to my wonderful Patreon group who support this channel. And I'll see you again soon, and happy painting. Bye.